You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Yeti, and I can confirm that. And I am joined by my co-host, as always, Mr. Matt Cozzolino. Matt, how are you?
I'm great. I don't know if I'm actually me, though.
No, I know. I might have to quarantine you if you don't turn around and really show me some ID. Yeah.
Send a summary email about all the things I'm asking about?
Yes, and I want to report and analyze and everything. So, okay, yes. Today we're talking email security. I don't want to be hyperbolic here. It's a technology that's so basic that's been around for, when was SendMail? 1970 something when the protocol?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, email was like one of the first ones, right?
And we're really still using under the covers the same exact protocol as it was written back then, too. We have since...
Here's this raw text
one of those,
flying through the
it's
internet.
like the Microsoft Windows of communication protocols, in that rather than just tear it all down and start anew, we have extended the base protocol for the purposes of backwards compatibility, right? If you say, you know what, I'm going to write SMTP2, it's not compatible with SMTP1 and whatever, you'd have that inflection point where that probably would never happen. You'd have dual stack and say, well, if it still works for dual stack, then...
We don't have a forcing thing like we're out of IPv4 addresses, so you have to do v6, right?
Right, and even then, just let me nat, man. Just let me nat.
Right.
But yeah, so there have been numerous attempts and implementations to leverage methods to say, hey, my email is who I say it is. And really, it goes back to the number one, to talk about the hyperbole. What's the number one threat cause? If I'm worried about ransomware, infiltration, whatever, what is attack route one?
It's the users, end user people. Right?
And how do I reach that end user if I'm an attacker?
Phishing emails, sending data to them, sending whatever.
Getting someone to click
that's
something.
That front door, yeah.
And it feels like we've been here throughout our careers. We've been here when it comes to Microsoft Office 2003. Would automatically load rich elements because, fancy rich emails. And oops, there was bad stuff being loaded in there via JavaScript or whatever. And then all the security. And yet we are still up against people clicking malicious things in emails, and away we go. And away we go. So that's why I think security for email is maybe the number one thing that you should be doing on your network, right? If you do nothing else.
There's that, yeah. But there's also, I think, the idea of like reputation, right? So if I've got this domain name, I don't want someone just sending mail and saying, yeah, I'm Kazo, I'm this guy, right? And there's I assume some functions, some tools I can use to help with that component as well, right?
Yeah, it's twofold. It's the actual practical security aspect of that, in terms of I don't want that happening from let's say I send to my customer gets an email from Ivoxy, quote unquote, and they click it. Well, I thought it was from Ivoxy, so that's bad just from the potential impact of that. And then from a brand reputation standpoint, Ivoxy sending spam, or that is almost the indirect effect of it, right? Maybe nothing happens, hopefully, but it's still a bad look, regardless of that.
It doesn't look good. Yeah, that's
So there's a number of things to do. So you're basically talking about protecting yourself from the mail flow coming in, and protecting and ensuring mail flow going out is legitimate. So the good news is there are a number of things. So I want to kind of put this out there early. This is coming soon, so stay tuned. And if you've got questions about more details, please reach out to your account manager, or podcast@ivoxy.com or info@ivoxy.com. I know we have a number. We have a contact form on our website too.
Just spam our request emails.
And I believe... I don't know if the title's been decided yet, but I'm going to call it an email integrity assessment. So we are going to be offering very soon a free email integrity assessment. So it's going to basically investigate a lot of the things we're going to be talking about in this episode and give you an overlay of what your email environment looks like, and if you're taking the right steps to ensuring that not only is your incoming mail flow as secure as possible, but the outgoing stuff that you aren't being spoofed or masqueraded as, and protecting your reputation and the environments of your customers by way of not being able to have your domain be used as kind of a relay domain for lack of better terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
It could. Good. And to make those happen, to affect those, I'm not as deep on the email as I think you are right now, but I've seen a lot of different options, a lot of different settings we use to set those, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe most of those actually end up being DNS settings, right?
It is because if I'm a mail server, and I'm up there and I'm sending email via the internet, how can that mail server, there is no mechanism natively to an email server to say, I belong to Ivoxy. It's just, you can claim it, but where's that validation? And that's where DNS comes in, because DNS is, above all, considered to be a trusted data source, right? And really, you can put records in that say, this email server is claiming this public key. On the back end, I've got some private stuff. And yes, I can confirm that server is sending with the proper, authority. So that's why you're right. With DNS, when comes DNS, comes a kind of a known, safe, trusted vault of information. Even though I'm saying vault and DNS and out of the box, it's not a secure service. You had talked earlier about DNSSEC and being able to effectively leverage cryptography to ensure that there are no man-in-the-middle attacks, that nobody can answer on the behalf of your domain and then hand out a bogus record, which can happen typically.
And that's that kind of, I mean, it's not just email that we have to deal with for DNS. That's your domain name, that's your certificates, we're seeing stuff like, back in the day, I'd use a .local for my Windows domain internal, which is now multicast DNS and all of that fun stuff. So there's some things there, and always it comes back to this, it always ends up being DNS again. Right?
And there's always that recursive step where it's like, okay, fine, if I'm going to have to trust DNS, if DNS is going to be my keystone and things involved, then you want to secure that too. Because otherwise it's like, okay, great, if that's vulnerable, then okay. DNSSEC lets you basically set at your registrar level, turn it on, and the keys are, depending on where your name servers are, you might need to create your own records if they're hosted elsewhere, but if they're at the registrar themselves, then that's usually an automatic process. And effectively, your domain will volunteer, hey, I have DNSSEC extensions turned on, and it's a method for clients to trust what they're hearing is true. There are a number of sites you can go on to and say, does my ISP DNS servers support DNSSEC? And what that means is the clients, the people asking for it, have to ask for it too. Because if you're not asking for it, ignoring it, then you are susceptible to anybody turning around and saying, yeah, here's Ivoxy.com's IP address, and that's no bueno. But we're seeing DNSSEC become more and more ubiquitous.
So DNSSEC is trusted transfer of domain info between top-level domain resolvers? Or
I believe it's actually the querying DNS server that will.
Okay. So through the DNS process, I put up like a text file, which is a public key type something that you can say, yes, that hash that you've got posted on there.
Pretty much at a very shallow level. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll admit, going down the crypto road, it can bend my mind into a pretzel too when you think about that stuff. So
just finally feeling comfortable with public.
I'm okay with the layer 7 application, layer 6 maybe, but you get down to layer 2, leave me out of it. Yeah. But so let's assume we've got DNSSEC.
I got that.
And I would say a couple of years ago I might have said, who cares? But now it's becoming more, if you can do DNSSEC, do it, because
it's not that hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard. And second to that, it's something where the casual spammer isn't going to, I think, really go to the trouble of trying to masquerade. They'll just move on to some other. But if there's a targeted effort, which happens, they might go after that as well to kind of compromise you there from the start.
It might not even be you. Like, so if we use our Ivoxy as an example, it might be that someone is targeting a customer of ours.
Right.
Using like, hey, Ivoxy sent you this invoice or something, and that's where it's important for
for Ivoxy to make sure we have DNSSEC enabled in our, yeah, exactly, and we do. So there are a number of things to basically make that mail server be able to say, I am who I say I am. And what that goes, like you said, goes to DNS. And one of the earlier ones, and this really pertains more to people who host their own mail servers. And, again, 5 years ago, that number was a lot greater than it is today, probably. But still, there's still a good portion of people out there who run their own, is a concept called forward confirmed reverse DNS. Okay. This is kind of a really shallow layman version of security. But again, it goes to not only DNS from your own control, but from the ISP. This is interesting. So I have a static IP from Comcast. I have business class, right? And I've got a static IP. You have what's called a pointer record. So where it's like, you look up ivoxy.com, it gives me an IP address. I can also look up that IP address, the in.arpa, the backwards.
The reverse address.
And it will say, boom, ivoxy.com. And so what you've basically done there is say, okay, whoever owns this IP address, and I would have to go through Comcast. Comcast is going to validate my identity, and that I quote unquote own that. I don't own the IP. Comcast does, but that I'm leasing that IP address, and they will allow me to say, okay, my Exchange server is exchange.ivoxy.com. And so that resolves to an IP address that happens to live on Comcast. And then I go to Comcast, I say, okay, that IP address reverse resolves to exchange.ivoxy.com. That right there is a nice way to say this IP and what I'm claiming to be is trusted. So if
it works both ways.
A spam server goes out and says I'm exchange.ivoxy.com and I resolve to 1234, okay, what's 1234 to resolve to? Not exchange.ivoxy. You're lying.
Let's drop the messages coming from that address because
so that's kind of like the baseline low level of effort, but really kind of
phase one. So we've got email onion going on here.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's called forward confirmed reverse DNS. Back in the day, decade ago or so, it was just coming up, and there were a lot of servers configured without this. Now any modern mail server filter is going to whack that. So that's one. And then we came up with SPF record. Go ahead, Maddie.
I was going to say, then what's the next one that we got? Because there's a couple of different things here.
And while chronologically I might be out of order here because these things could be 30 years old but finally just getting absorbed now, but ultimately it feels like the next layer was sender policy framework.
Okay.
SPF record is basically, again, set in the domain, your DNS record. It is a text record that takes a certain format where you basically say these servers are allowed to send mail on behalf of ivoxy.com. And so in our case, you'd put Microsoft 365, and email providers will
hosted email when you're using 365. When you're using Google, you say these are
exactly. And Google's going to give you a record, but if you look up that record, it's going to contain a number of IP ranges, addresses, whatever. And so basically, any message that comes out of that, as long as it's in your SPF record, it says, okay, these are authorized sources for mail that say, hey, I'm ivoxy.com. There is additional information you can put in those records that say, hey, if somebody fails this, do a soft fail. So allow it to be delivered, but the filter will say, oh, that's soft fail. So I'm gonna notify you. I'm gonna put it in your quarantine. You can be super strict about it. Any of these things, it's best to be.
I can configure that as the email owner to say, hey, you know what, I'm not quite there yet. Let me turn on soft fail.
Very permissive to start with, and then you can become more strict. Yes, okay. For sure. And so that effectively locks it down to allowing a network. If traffic is coming from here, not exactly a explicit machine, but IP addresses that say I'm from ivoxy.com, that's how you give it the green light there. The it doesn't necessarily couple with it, but we'll get to the point how it does. The next is DKIM, domain keys identified mail.
Ooh.
This back to crypto.
All of the acronyms.
Back to crypto. This is where you get a private public pair key generated on the sending server itself, or servers. And then it will say, here's what I call myself, selector one. They use a selector designation, but you effectively have to create another DNS record with the public key pointing to that record that you've built.
You go get into your email system. You go configure, like if you're running Exchange, if you're running 365, if you're running wherever, there's that. You have to go interact with that software to get the data out that you dump in this text file.
You do, and oftentimes something like a 365, they'll tell you what those records are because your tenant themselves will already have them built, and then it's up to you.
Or something. It's like, boom, there it is. Yeah.
Right, and if you do nothing, nothing happens. You don't need it to have it work, but at that point, they have what's called a DMARC record. So this basically is a record where it all ties together, and you say, hey, if traffic comes in and fails, then this is what you do. So absent that record, those things help delivery, but they don't instruct well-behaved recipient mail servers to do anything. So I'm sending you something, Kaz, at kazo.net or whatever, and I say, hey, if any of these fail, quarantine or flat out reject that email, and your server will say, I'll honor that request. This looks like bogus.
Or not, right? That was going to be my next question, was like, so there's all of these settings as well, but if you're running your own mail server, you have to also configure your mail server to pay attention to and manage and do whatever these security settings are suggesting you do, right?
That's typically done at the filter level.
Okay.
So, 365's got its basic built-in protection. I'm not a huge fan, right? We've recently partnered with ProofPoint, which is widely considered the number one top tier, email security gateway, and they do a ton of stuff, right? But we're talking about email filtering here. Had a lot of success with them, and we're dog fooding that as well. We do it, and it's been very enlightening, because whereas I feel like I know a lot about SPF and DKIM and DMARC and things like that, I obviously have recently learned that there's still always more to learn in terms.
So you know enough to know how much you don't know.
Right. There's something like SFP adherence, but then there's SFP alignment. So there's two tiers of are you really satisfying these requirements? Things like that. And a lot of it comes from envelope senders. Think of Amazon. It might send from matt@ivoxy.com, but when you look at the return envelope, the envelope from, it's Matt equals ivoxy.com at amazonses.com. It's that dynamic generated from, and if that doesn't match, then you're not in alignment. And it's really, when you do these kind of things, you start off with a very permissive DMARC record. Basically, you say, don't do anything. None is your action. And then in that record, you could say, send aggregate reports and send deep analysis reports to this email address. So then you get an XML file every night or whatever you want that's going to tell you, this is how much email went out from your domain, because like Comcast will send you what it saw. Yahoo will send you what it saw. Mail servers will send that to the report address, and then you can drag that XML file into a little free analyzer online, and it'll say, this is what your email breakdown is like. This is who failed and why it failed.
Okay.
It's a ton of work.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. But
so having a email filter in front of your, say, on-prem mail server is a easier, simple way to handle that, because they've got all of those right there in a nice little dashboard.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's a must. I'm a huge fan of having your arms around your email flow, especially from a recipient standpoint, is in that, if you got email that's coming through, first of all, you only want it filtered in one place. You don't want two levels of spam filtering, because then what quarantine did it end up in?
Which one?
But one of the worst questions you want to hear, especially in an organization that runs on sales, which most any organization does, is, hey, I didn't get that email from a customer, or that invoice didn't come through, or that account payable, the receipt. Like, you want to make sure that stuff gets delivered. And if they do need to go in and look for it, you want that to be transparent and easily accessible. It's super important. And I like dedicated third-party email filters for that as well.
I know it makes my network security side a little happier when I see this email rule for this Exchange server or whatever, and it's SMT 25 in, for example, and it's from these 4 addresses.
Only
these 4 addresses, right? I'm like, okay, cool. You've got something out there that's hitting all of this.
Well, imagine you don't put that risk there, but you pop port 25. Fine, I'll find out what your email server IP is. I'll just go around your third-party gateway. I'll ignore your MX record and send it right to.
Let me just send it wherever I want. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember way back, mid-2000s, I was at a consulting company, and we had a NOC where we had hosted services. And this is where I really got into email filtering myself. We rolled our own filter. We were doing all this store and forward stuff. It was cool. But this is back in the day when a T1 would be an extremely common internet connection to have at a company office. Just a T1. And you can imagine the mid-2000s, Windows XP, self-propagating worms, the amount of email traffic that was spam could choke a T1.
Oh, yeah.
It really could, especially talk about attachments.
They're not that big.
No, 1.5 megabit.
Exactly.
Little bitty.
Yeah.
And so, email traffic with any kind of modest attachments, which are viruses, right, are flooding that T1. So what we did as a company was, this is to sell it. I mean, the benefit is, hey, you could have a filter on site, whatever, and then you have to maintain it, manage it, monitor it, all this kind of stuff. And then what you're doing still is your T1 is being saturated with that traffic, and then you filter it on premise and pass it along to your mail server and hope there's nothing bad in there. Cloud services, third-party cloud gateways for filtering, clean all that junk up and only deliver me the good stuff. And we were monitoring people's bandwidth charts, with Smoke Ping and PRT, Cacti,
Cacti. Oh,
and you just saw it fall off a cliff the second we switched that MX record over. So it was really cool to keep that traffic off your network too.
And that kind of security, that scrubbing concept, as an aside, I'm seeing exist or show up more with web traffic, right? I can go to F5, I can go to Cloudflare, Amazon, front my website through them, and then bring it back to my on-prem website.
Yes.
Do all my scrubbing, do all my DDoS protection on this massive cloud service, and then bring it back inside, which also kind of helps hammering my on-prem environment, because maybe you've got a server room in the closet or something, right?
Another thing I like about some of the gateways and ProofPoints, for example, I want to have them on a pod here because I know they have a lot to say. I think maybe next episode we can get somebody on. They have the emergency inbox feature too, and I know some other competitors have this as well. But the idea is, what do we call Office 365? Office 360, because it's like a handful of days that's not gonna come to work in the morning kind of thing. And unfortunately, now with the shift to cloud, you've got, hey, Mr. IT administrator, my email's down in the cloud. I'm shrugging. It's like, okay, what would you like me to do about it now? I'm sure we're all there. We've all felt that way. Emergency inbox is something that allows you to continue to receive mail. It just won't it sits up there in that gateway, but it's received, and it allows you to send back out. And operate out of your mailbox, which is nice for the short-term moments when the back-end system goes down, which it does from time to time.
Oh, it does. Everything.
That's a cool feature. Yeah.
Nice.
So the one other thing we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned it on here yet, but there's one that's quite new, and it's I think it goes to security because perception is also a big part of it, but it's called BIMI, B-I-M-I, and what it is it's a brand image management interface. I don't know if that's what it stands for off the top of my head, but
that sounds like it works.
It seems like it would be, right? And so what it basically does is, again, another DNS record, and then you also have to create an SVG file, which is a vector graphic.
So I saw that.
Of your logo.
Does that get dropped in the DNS and it just pulls the vector data from a DNS record?
Yes, it does.
Neat.
Here's the bad news. Well, first, it's a very young standard.
Okay.
But the idea is Kazo goes to his Gmail and he's got a list of senders. Look at Microsoft 365. You go into Outlook and if you get something from Salesforce, it's a blue circle with an S. We all know what that looks like. If Salesforce was participating in this, that would be Salesforce's logo there. And so what it's trying to do is lend more credence, legitimacy to the mail by saying, here's my logo. Because right now there's no way to get Outlook to show an icon of my company, right? It's not, you can't attach it, you can't determine it
not up in the header.
It's not a header, it's not a subject.
Exactly. Yeah, I can hit slip down by like my signature or something.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So what BIMI does is do that. Is basically it refers to the graphics, the vector file, it renders it, and it displays it in the list. Now the bad news. The standard is so new. It's years, but in the way that tech moves sometimes, right? There's also a concept to it that's a VMC. It's a certificate.
Okay.
And what the certificate really does is it's an SSL cert that is granted once they confirm that the trademark belongs to your company.
Okay. So
this way I can't just put Ivoxy's logo in Acme Incorporated and send email and and all of that. So I get that.
Who does the certificate?
It's like 2 of them, like Entrust and DigiCert, and they're anywhere from a G to $1,500 a year.
Ooh.
I mean, they're gouging on the fact that it's new, it's very not adopted
like
yet.
A Let's Encrypt type something for that, right?
Let's Encrypt right. I think the involvement comes, and I can understand it at least a little bit, in that there is an involvement with trademark at that point. And when you think about trademark, you're thinking Google, you're thinking AT&T, companies that have
a trademark of some sort.
Everyone has a trademark, but not everybody has a legal team to necessarily stand up and push that. Yeah. So, there's that, but I would love to have any little company with a logo be able to do this, but a lot of people are going to look at $1,000 a year cost for an SSL cert and say, maybe not, kind of thing. Google will only
turn around and buy a wildcard cert from GoDaddy or something, right?
Right. well, Google will not show I've been testing this. Google will not show the logo unless you have that cert.
Well, that's how it's supposed to work, though, right?
It doesn't have to. Like Yahoo will allow it, right? Currently, I think we're in that model where we're more permissive now, but as it becomes more ubiquitous, they're going to start to lock it down. Hopefully, though, at that point, cost also kind of heads to the bottom as well.
Yeah.
On that. But that's BIMI, and I think that's cool.
That's pretty neat.
I mean, right now, me sending to you within Outlook, I see you see my face on that circle, because that's what it's leveraging. But that's an internal thing.
There's some there's some internal Outlook contact. You're this person,
So that replaces that BIMI logo,
Yeah. But that doesn't, so like all of these technologies, all of these tools are great for saying, hey, yes, I am who I am. Yes, this mail is legit. And yes, this is correct. But none of that does anything for the fact that I'm still effectively sticking a postcard in the mail. The email message itself, the body, the content, the data is still plain text unencrypted data.
Right, that's correct. And I think when it comes down to deliverability, that's what we're talking. That's what we've been talking about. But then you've got, okay, fine, I can get my mail delivered, but how do I get it there securely? And another piece of that is outgoing email encryption. And that's something that ProofPoint does as well. And ideally, a lot of these efforts are to make sure that your mail server stays secure, doesn't get put on blacklists. God forbid, doesn't get put on blacklists.
You get that domain listed somewhere, yeah.
And so, in addition, with incoming mail filtering, there's also the outgoing, where you can push your email right back out the same way it came in. Now you've got that bi-directional filtering where why
are you sending mail to this brand new domain that got registered in RU?
Well, imagine if you have an Exchange server and somebody gets hacked, starts sending mail out, and all of a sudden now your server's gets blacklisted. Well, if you go through a filter like a ProofPoint, then it will catch the outgoing mail too and alert you and say, hey, you've got an infection going on, which is nice. But as another side benefit of having all your mail outgoing flow through something like that, you can also do things like email encryption. So if I put the word secure with brackets in my subject anywhere, it will encrypt it, then hold the message there, send an email to the recipient and say, hey, you've got an encrypted message. Come over here, register your account so you can log in in the future and not have to do this every time. And now you've got this. If I just capture the email with the well, there is no email with the content, right? There's nothing to grab.
It's a link to this place where you go log in and de-encrypt it and see it through a web, through HTTPS. Yeah. I want to say there's, like, it's not just drop secure inside of brackets. It'll do things like regex for a social security number and say, hey, you've got a social security number. You've got this specific data in this body content of this email. I'm going to proactively...
You can do all kinds of stuff like that.
That kind of thing.
And that kind of ties in with data loss prevention as well.
Yeah.
And because email, it is just the wide open front door.
It is. Old.
And no offense to users, because we all are users and we've all been that user at one time probably, and that, you can have the most robust technological solutions, and just if you've got somebody determined whether consciously or unconsciously to go around that, it's very hard to stop that. And user education is a piece of that. So, that's another thing that, we're invested in and making sure that it's not just a silver bullet product. We have to make sure that people understand the why of all of this. And we're not trying to make your jobs harder. We're not trying to slow you down, but you don't want to be the one on the hook for a breach either.
Yeah.
So I think there should be a little investment there too.
Giant secure door, but if you prop it open, it's kind of useless.
Yeah. It's just funny throughout my career that I've bumped up against email filtering for the better part of 20 years, and I love it and hate it all at once. I love it and hate it.
Yeah. It's a necessary evil that we've gotten good at, right?
It is, but let's just start over. Let's just start and create a new protocol, and it's not compatible with the old one. Let's just start it over, and then basically
we end up with Slack and Teams and.
Oh no, never mind. I withdraw. I humbly withdraw my. Thanks, Matt.
No problem.
Good work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my spiel of that. We will be doing free email integrity assessments. So if you're interested in that, just kind of give you an overview of, paint a picture of your current email security posture, both incoming and outgoing, to verify and validate your and enforce your integrity. Reach out to your AM or hit us at podcast@ivoxy.com. We'll get you in touch with who you need to, and it's not a lot of effort. We can do as part of it, we'll be doing what's called if you're on 365, that is, which a lot of our customers are, a rapid risk report, which will give you it takes 5 minutes, a 2-week snapshot of any threats or things that have gotten by into your user mailboxes. Super cool.
Nice.
Super cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we did email stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I talked way too much over you, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, it was pretty good.
Get some water there. Yeah, you're heading out to vacation for a little bit.
I am. I'm going to be gone for a bit. I'm going to enjoy some sun, enjoy some water.
Very nice. I'm glad we got this call in then before.
Me too.
Yeah, it's good. It's been a little while, so
Yep.
It's always good to chat with you.
You too.
And may your inbox stay free of spam.
Let's hope. Knock on wood.
Thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Data Center Therapy. Have a good one.